going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So Michigan State basketball gets their third offseason transfer portal commit and probably their last one of this offseason in Divine Ugochukwu. Now, I know I probably said that last name wrong, but we're going to roll with that until we get corrected or until we hear it differently. But Divine Ugochukwu was a freshman last year at Miami, from Texas originally, and he transfers in, choosing Michigan State over other schools that he considered. USC and Texas Tech, I believe, was the other school that he also considered. 3 years of eligibility remaining, as he'll come in as a sophomore as well, fill that backup point guard slot. So, as we said, this is probably the last offseason commitment in terms of the transfer portal for Michigan State, unless something crazy kind of happens here in the next couple months, and kind of doubt that. But anyway, we're going to dive into a little bit of his game, kind of his archetype, where he's going to fit into this roster next year and what we expect out of him coming over not just next year, but over the next couple years as well. But before we do jump in, if you could, just hit that like and subscribe button down there. We'll have more Michigan State content on the channel. We'll have more basketball content on the channel as we move throughout the summer, kind of what we expect from each player on the roster and kind of more team outlook as everything, it seems like the roster is probably finalized after this move, but definitely, especially as we get closer and if any more games get finalized, we have a couple finalized, right now. Talk about that, but then also Michigan State football closing in on about 14 weeks until kickoff, so we'll definitely have more content on the channel too as we move closer to that, but just make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. So jumping into Divine Ugochukwu, 6'3", 190 from Sugar Land, Texas, played at Miami last year, as we said, played in 28 games, started 16 of them, about 20 minutes per game. Now, averaged about 5 points a game, 2 assists, about 2 rebounds as well. Shot about 48% from the field, only 18% about from 3. We'll touch more on that here in a second. And 63% from the free throw line. Now, did average a steal per game, though. Turned it over about 1.6 times, 2 times a game about. But besides that, you jump in and look at some of his tape. He is 6'3", so he is a longer, lankier point guard that will be added to this roster. Kind of similar, not saying their games are similar at all, but to Trey Holloman. Trey Holloman was a longer point guard and, could defend, with his wingspan and then also get to the basket and finish. And that's kind of some of what I see from Divine Ugochukwu here. And, he can get to the basket, finish at the rim, but then also he's a solid defender. As we said, a steal per game. I think that's where we can start to see him immediately make an impact next year on the defensive side. If he can come in next year, I know we're kind of jumping a little bit towards expectations, but if next year he can see the floor as that backup point guard, handling those minutes, as we said, when Jeremy Fears isn't going to play 40 minutes a game. So handling those minutes without Jeremy on the floor, and then just provide solid passing, taking care of the basketball, distributing it to your guys on the wings, Cohen Carr, as we talked about, some of our transfers coming in, Trey Fort, Caleb Glenn, as well, other guys we have running the wing, and then just distributing the ball well, taking care of that thing, but then also defending as well. I think that's where he can make an immediate impact next year, serving as that backup point guard. Now, obviously, you look at the stuff that definitely needs improvement. The three-point shooting and the free throw shooting, about 18% from 3 and about 63% from the free throw line. So those two things definitely need to be, improved on. But, watching some of the cut up of some of his film last year, it's not like he has a bad shot or a broken shot. And last year he averaged about 0.2 to 1.2 3-point attempts per game. So, yes, he did not shoot a lot. And I don't think we're going to need him to shoot a lot, but definitely have to get that free throw number up. I feel like the other guys that Michigan State brought in this offseason can fill that 3-point void that we will need to on the wings. Divine just needs to be able to distribute that ball to them, and as we said, defend. And if he can add, he had about 2 rebounds per game last year. If he can add that element too, because listen, I think looking at this roster next year, I think this is going to be a very athletic roster for Michigan State. And I think that's very exciting. And I think that's kind of the direction that they're kind of leaning towards going into next year. You obviously got Jeremy Fears, you got Divine Ugochukwu running the point guard position, but then you got athletes and shooters running the wing. You got Kurtang, you got Cohen Carr running one wing, you got Caleb Glenn running, Trey Fort running as well. I think this is going to be, you got freshmen coming in, Jordan Scott, Cam Ward. I think this is going to be an exciting athletic team. I think the thing that will need to be proven throughout the season, because obviously it's something that Michigan State struggled with last season as well, is three-point shooting. Who is going to be the three-point shooters on this team next year? Obviously, right away you look at Kurtang, probably going to be up there, one of the leaders for that category. But then you got to look at Trey Fort and Caleb Glenn. Got to fill one of those in terms of a three-point shooter. And then, what can Jordan Scott or Cam Ward give you in those minutes? So, kind of who emerges from that group as, a solid three-point shooter is kind of going to be interesting going into next year when we look at the roster as a whole. But really, to wrap things up here on Divine Ugochukwu transferring in, I think this is a solid pickup for Michigan State. Fills a need as a backup point guard because for what they were looking for, should I say what were they looking for and what they're looking to replace? I think this does it, and I think this also says too, getting a guy like Divine Ugochukwu, as going over his stats. This isn't a guy that is going to go out and replace Jace Richardson's production last year of 14 plus points a game. He's a guy that's going to come in off the bench behind Jeremy, which is what you needed. He's going to defend, and if he can take care of the ball and pass that thing around and provide those solid minutes as Jeremy is off the floor, then I think this is a win here. Because a lot of next year really comes down to the development of the guys that are already on the roster, and then the guys that Michigan State has already brought in. That doesn't mean Divine's going to have a really big impact on next year's team and roster, because obviously we can't have Jeremy Fears playing 40 minutes a game. And as I have said in multiple videos before this, if Jeremy Fears has to sit down, who is going to be handling the ball? Yes, Kurtang can handle the ball, but I also don't want Kurtang handling the ball for, many big possessions, to try to get into the offense. He can initiate the offense, okay, and start it, but not like, Jeremy Fears. It's different stuff that you would be running if Kurtang was starting the offense, or even a Caleb Glenn or a Trey Fort, different stuff. So Divine is going to fill that role, and I think he's going to do a good job in filling that role. Picks up that need, but a lot of next season's roster is going to be determined on, we saw Michigan State do the things they did this past year without having really good three-point shooting, outside of, Jace Richardson. So if you even just go off that, who's going to be the one guy that does that? But I think with this roster next year, like I said, I think it's going to be really fun, athletic, defensive roster going into next year. And I think Divine, checks those boxes, and I think he'll slide right in to this roster going into next season. So as I said, I think this is probably it for off-season transfer portal additions for Michigan State. Does that mean something can be a surprise a couple months from now in this transfer portal era? Yes, anything is possible, but I'm assuming that the roster is probably set as it is right now. So we will do more videos as we move closer into summer, and then do more talk as more games get scheduled as we move closer. As we move throughout summer, should I say, closer into next year. But anyway, that'll do it for this one. As I said, I think this is a solid pickup for Michigan State, and excited to see how he fits into this roster next year, because I think this fills the need that they need going into next year. So I like the pickup, but anyway, that'll do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.